Hi, everyone. And look, today I've got Fluffy, I've got Chocolate. They actually were hanging around right at my feet up to about 2 minutes before we normally get everything seated down so I can say hello to you guys. And that's when they do their game and they go off to another room. But tonight, when I walked up to them, it was almost like, well, maybe we're going to go and maybe we're going to stay. And I got to pick them both up. And I thought, wow, they look like a Rembrandt of fluffy kitties. And I have some great news. And that is that we broke through 148,000 subscribers this week. It's just thrilling. I love you guys. And what I hope is that you all maybe could tell everybody that you know, and that we might set our own sort of another little goal, and that is, can we break through 150,000 subscribers by August 5th, in the first week of August? It's just a goal to put out there. And I'll have the kidders with me. I'm going to have something special so that they can stay with us. And we'll do that champagne party. It's just fantastic the way things have been growing. And in this week, there has been, to me, from having done so much medical work in my life in television, that some of the greatest news was about the positive progress in the COVID-19 vaccine trials by Oxford University in the UK in partnership with pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca. And on Monday, July 20th, the Lancet reported that 1,077 human volunteers were injected with the trial vaccine against COVID-19. So far, it has proven safe and does activate antibodies and immune cells against COVID-19. That's what we need so badly. And the only side effect in 70% of that first 1,077 people tested was fever and or headache that was managed by painkillers. And as the kitties take off, I'm going to continue, because I think that one of the exciting things that is happening now is that the next phase of the trials for this vaccine will be 10,000 people in the UK, 30,000 people in the United States, 2,000 people in South Africa, and 5,000 people in Brazil. That's when the scientists will know if the new vaccine, quote, can offer protection against infection by the live coronavirus and whether it can stop people from becoming ill with COVID-19, close quote. Once that happens, we can begin to actually start living life more normally on the world. Now, currently, more than 140,000 coronavirus vaccines are in development, but only 23 of those are being tested on people, which is where the real, true reality test is. The number of new cases is growing faster than ever worldwide, with more than 100,000 reported each day. And since January 2020, the official number of confirmed COVID cases around the world is 15,347,535 people. And as of today, Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020, at 5 p.m. Mountain, at least 625,106 people, I think of souls, have died. The virus has been detected in nearly every country on Earth. The number of known coronavirus cases in the United States continues to grow quickly. As of today, by 5 p.m. Mountain, the total case count is 3,882,167. That includes Washington, D.C. and 4 U.S. territories where people have tested positive for the virus, according to the Centers for Disease Control, and at least 141,677 patients with the virus have died. 14 states this week have reported more than 1,000 daily new cases. And as of July 17th, 2020, ABC and Fox News have reported that 29 states now and the territory of Puerto Rico currently require the use of masks, face coverings in public sites and gatherings. I think it's become clear to most everyone now that the wearing of masks could help get this under control. Now, let's turn from these problems on the surface of our Earth and let's go into outer space, which is becoming quite exciting. Last week, I reported that 3 countries are headed for Mars this month, and the first one blasted off on Sunday, July 19th. At 6:58 a.m., the United Arab Emirates launched its first interplanetary spacecraft headed for Mars from the Tanegashima Space Center on the coast of Tanegashima, Japan. 7 months from now, it will face the challenge of landing safely on the red planet. This is the first successful launch of 3 different July 2020 Mars missions scheduled for blastoffs to the red planet. Next up, China on July 23rd, tomorrow, followed by the American Perseverance rover on July 30th. In a month from now, the UAE Hope spacecraft will ignite a long burn in its onboard thrusters to correct its path for a specific landing site on Mars. The manager of the UAE Mars mission is Pete Withnell, PhD, program manager at the University of Colorado's Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics in Louisville, Colorado. Dr. Withnell emphasized the challenge ahead for this HOPE spacecraft. He said this week, quote, "It's a very small target. It's equivalent to an archer hitting a 2-millimeter target from 1 kilometer away. So this is not for the faint of heart," close quote. Well, if it all goes well and the weather hangs in there, China should launch tomorrow to Mars, and it will be carrying ground-penetrating radar to map the subsurface features on the red planet. And a week later, on July 30th, the United States is planning to launch its large new rover called Perseverance. And it too will have ground-penetrating radar. 7 months from now, in February of 2021, if all missions getting there are successful, this will be the first time that 3 nations from Earth will be exploring Mars at the same time: China, the United Arab Emirates, and the United States. And some military whistleblowers over the past decade have warned me that life on Earth was expected to hit big challenges in the specific decade of 2020 to 2030. No one, not any of them, said that there would be the worst pandemic in a century. But they warned me and said that there were all kinds of projections that 2020 to 2030 was really going to be hard on Earth. And now we know, so many scientists are saying this is the time of the 6th mass extinction. And on that list of Earth life that will be entirely gone by the end of this century are deer polar bears. It's estimated that there are now maybe 25,000 in the Arctic, but as the ice keeps melting more and more rapidly, the seals and other marine life that have sustained polar bears for centuries are themselves dwindling in numbers and the polar bears are starving. This links to what Buddy Bolton, the remote viewer from the Bronx, said in my July 8th broadcast earlier this month with him. That's when he described the 6.5-foot tall alien beings with white skin and dirty blonde hair as, quote, under a time crunch in Mage, Brazil on May 12, 2020. That's when their UFO spacecraft allegedly was shot down by the United States and the 3 alien beings were killed. So what did Buddy mean that the aliens were, quote, under a time crunch, close quote? I asked him this week, and this is what he wrote back, quote, because of the mass extinction and the problems with humans. So the aliens, are desperately trying to collect all of the life forms and data associated before they cannot collect. Every day, a certain number of species goes extinct, and that rate has been increasing. I just can't believe humans are doing this and are not doing something about it. It's so heartbreaking. It's kind of like the same reason why Noah with his ark collected animals instead of people, close quote. Buddy and I have also talked about the role that the technology of invisibility has played in this haunted planet, as John Keel, the UFO investigator, wrote in his brilliant book published in 1971 entitled Our Haunted Planet. On pages 178 to 179, Keel described Nikola Tesla working in his Colorado Springs lab in the summer of 1899, right at the end of that century. Keel wrote, quote, Tesla's equipment suddenly came to life, and he received an apparently intelligent signal, although undecipherable to Nikola Tesla. Then Keel quoted Tesla's thoughts about other intelligences interacting with Earth. Quote, this is Nikola Tesla, and this is what he wrote. The feeling is constantly growing on me that I have been the first to hear the greeting of one planet to another. And then Tesla wondered if, quote, ultra-terrestrials might be presented here on our world in the very midst of us, but we humans are unable to perceive them, close quote. I have had a physicist and other scientists tell me that the 3 superior technologies that alien intelligences have used on Earth for centuries are 3D holograms, anti-gravity, and invisibility. Invisible craft moving in the skies of Earth have been a serious question since World War II. Remember, it was only 3 weeks ago in my July 1st live stream that I interviewed the Austrian Richard after he and his wife heard at their mountaintop summer home the loud sounds of circling jets that Richard recorded on his iPhone. But neither of them could see anything above their mountaintop except blue sky and white puffy clouds. Since that report, I have received questions from some of you about invisible entity experiences, including a 57-year-old woman, Lynn Monet, who has been a professional nurse for 34 years in medical, surgical, urology, and geriatrics. Her nursing degrees include South Carolina's Greenville Technical College from 2013 to 2016. Currently, she works as an in-home care manager with a large insurance company. Lynn Monet was born in Sarasota, Florida, and raised in Palm Beach County. She is a single mother of 3 and currently lives in South Carolina. Since she was a child, she could see shadows and translucent shapes that other people could not see. That ability to perceive frequencies nearly overwhelmed her in 2007. After a difficult divorce, she bought and moved into a house with her children that she would end up writing about in a 2017 Kindle book on Amazon entitled Omnipresent, about entities in that house that were always appearing and disappearing and were ever present, which is the title of the book. That even if we cannot see them, that other frequency beings are around us, among us, perhaps above us at all times, appearing and disappearing. This cover was inspired by her son, Austin Caldera, who is now 22 years old. He saw bony, withered hands come right through the wood of a door in their house. And now, I would like to share with you a recorded interview that I did recently with Lynn Monet about her ability to perceive frequencies that most humans do not perceive, including the other dimensional frequency of alien intelligences that are nearly invisible.
I know that it was around Valentine's Day, February of 2008, because we had little hearts hanging on the outside of the door. So I had been working this shift for several years. I had a client at the end of the hallway that had 11 o'clock medication to help her sleep and for pain that I would regularly take down the hallway. She was in the last room on the left of about 23 rooms. Normally, I would go down and take her medication. I would have to check her blood pressure prior to taking her medication. I would speak with her for a little bit about her day, and then I would leave the room. However, on this particular day, as I turned the corner into her room, the lights were off, but the light from the hallway illuminated into the room, and I stopped in the doorway because I could see this movement, this shuffling of beings. This is real. There's something here. I have the ability to see interdimensionally at times, but I didn't say anything. She was laying in the bed on her side, facing me. I saw on the opposite side of the bed 5 beings similar height, and they seemed to be very, very busy. I noticed that they were pulling things out of different areas on her body and replugging things in, almost like a switchboard operator. And I didn't know what to do. I knew that it was some kind of interdimensional vision or something, so I went ahead and I proceeded into the room to take the client's blood pressure. I was watching this movement of these beings. They were approximately like 4 to 4.5 feet tall. I am 5'9", and they were shorter than me. They came up to about my shoulder. And I noticed this because one of them actually came around to the bedside that I was on and walked through me to continue whatever this work was that they were doing.
How could you be there and be seeing what your mind told you must be another frequency dimension on the other side of the bed, but for one of these to come around and move through you, how could you tolerate it?
Well, because I had an experience prior with paranormal activity in a home that I purchased, and I became desensitized to the fear process. The best way for me to describe it is it's like walking up to a large plate glass window where you see your own reflection. It's there, but it's not solid.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a wavering to the air. You can actually see it. With the lighting the way that it was much easier to see them than it would have been if it had been in broad daylight. And they totally ignored the fact that I was there. And I wasn't afraid. And not only that, I was there to give this person their medication, and I wasn't going to say anything because I didn't want to alarm her and have her think that I was crazy. But
when you say you can see the air move a little bit and that you're seeing them as entities, Can you do more of a word picture about whether they look a little bit solid or is it completely translucent? What are you seeing?
They had arms and legs. They had hands. They were in like all white, no markings on it.
Like little robes that had hoods?
Yes.
Any faces?
No. The material was over the face. It was almost as if they could see through the fabric, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Did you try to reach out and see what it felt like to touch them?
When the one walked through me, it was awkward because I even found myself saying, "Excuse me." Like I had bumped into somebody and I'm like, "Oh, excuse me." And I caught myself and I thought, well, that was kind of silly that I even said it because I actually said it out loud.
Could you feel anything when this being passed through you?
My hair was raising up on my arms, like electrical almost. But the thing that I did remember is the frequency change in my ears. It was like a buzzing, like a frequency change.
That the very next microsecond it went bzzz in your ears?
It wasn't like something that came from the outside. It was like something within my ear had this frequency change.
When the being passed through you, did you ever in your mind's eye see any symbols, hieroglyphs, or images?
A triangle comes to mind, like a triangle formation, almost like a pyramid-looking thing.
When did this woman pass?
She passed in 2010.
Were you there when she passed?
I was not, and I wish that I had been.
What is the mechanism of interfacing between another dimension and this one in which the other dimension can interact with flesh and can affect things electromagnetically? How do you think that works?
I do not know. I just know that I've seen them. When my mother passed away, it was almost as if a veil occurred when she actually exited to the other side, and I saw my grandmother and my sister there.
And you were seeing a veil that was translucent?
Well, it was a veil that wasn't overly translucent to start. You could just see some movement behind it, but as it got closer to her time to cross over, it completely removed itself from the room, so the whole side was open. You could see more through it and more through it. As the veil would start to efface, I could see my grandmother, who had passed away a long time ago, come in, and she started stroking my mother's arm and whispering something into her ear. My mother, who couldn't open her eyes anymore but was still responding by eyebrows and mouth movements, would then try to make mouth movements to respond to whatever was being whispered into her ear, and her eyebrows were kind of going up and down.
And did you see your mother's mother on the other side of the veil?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. The veil opened, and she was able to come through.
When the grandmother who has passed, who is in another dimension, comes through the veil to her daughter, your mother, what transpired that you could see with your sensitive eyes and consciousness between the grandmother who is already in another dimension but has shown up when her daughter, your mother, is passing? What happened?
I was watching, and when my grandmother walked in, and behind her, my sister came in who had passed at age 20, and I saw her and I could smell her perfume so vividly. She wore a perfume called Latif, which is not common. And then it's like the whole veil just removed itself. And at one point, the elation that came from all of what was going on, it was like a huge reunion party almost. When my mother exited her body, they were like huddled in a football type figuration. And when they started to stand up away, my mother was in the center. To me, it was almost as if they were trying to stabilize her spiritual feet. And I realized in that moment, my mother has just stopped breathing. I'm sitting here smiling, watching what's going on. So I called the nurse at that point in time, and they did come in and pronounce her dead. But I also told my mother before she passed that my sister and that her mother were here to help her cross over and that it was time for her to go. And she stopped breathing within about 10 minutes.
If at the passing of Homo sapiens sapien, if at the death of human beings, whole families and generations that have passed and we would call death can return at exactly the moment of the passing, what is the communication between the dimensions and the frequencies? How does it work? How did your mother communicate to her mother, to your sister, if they passed a long time before? They're in already another dimension, and yet you, the one with the talented ability to see in other frequencies, can be sitting next to your mother, and she is getting ready to pass, but has not. And then you see her mother and your sister come into that room, and they have a celebration and a support process for your mom who is still alive in this dimension. What in the world is the communication that would bring the mother and the daughter, a family, together at the moment of death here? What is the physics?
I'm sorry, I don't know. It just is. I mean, it's one of those things that's not explainable in human terms. It's something from somewhere else. I have no idea. It's like something that just happens with the soul where it prepares itself that way.
Have you ever had a very vivid dream in which you thought that you were seeing the dimension that we humans would go to at the moment of death?
I have, yes.
What did you see?
There's a particular entity that I've seen more than once, and he is a man with very, very white, longer hair. Below appeared to be a beautiful city. It looked almost like opalescent walls or alabaster. It was like one solid piece. There were beautiful arched doorway openings.
When I use the word reincarnation, what does that mean to you?
That was part of my questioning, too, when I got to see what I was shown with the white buildings. My feeling was that aliens were not allowed in that part. I don't know why, but that's where souls go. And after listening to you talk about the aliens, it kind of started to come together and make sense, which is the reason for which they want our souls. I don't know if aliens even die. I don't know where they go. But the soul definitely, from what I have seen, has a place to go. And some of them do reincarnate and some of them do not.
What would your perspective be on what appears to be a growing theme in research having to do with extraterrestrial biological entities, or at least humanoid types of a variety, that what they want is the soul in Homo sapiens sapien, that we are a life experiment, and it is as if a divine field decided to insert into this laboratory experiment a very strong soul, that the experimenters, the laboratory scientists of the ETs do not have. And that when they begin to realize that their laboratory experiment of standing primates on Earth had these strong souls, then the laboratory experimenters from someplace in the cosmos wanted our souls, and that much of what they have done on this planet is trying to find ways to get the human soul.
I agree with that. I do agree with that. I do agree that there are aliens, and I do agree that there's a difference between us, and it is the essence. It's the spark. It's the creativity and personality part of us that we have that these other things don't. I do believe that there is a place that our souls go that is different from aliens, and aliens are also somewhat envious because we do get to go to that place, and it's because of our uniqueness, that life force that we carry that is unique, the aliens want to tap into.
The aliens cannot go to the place of human souls.
No, they cannot.
as I did that interview with Lynn Monet, I remember that I was thinking about a woman that I interviewed for my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2. And she was sitting in the morning over on in the Portland area in Oregon. And she was sitting at a table in a house that she had on a hill that looked out over sort of a valley. She was in a crest. And she loved to sit there and do correspondence at a certain time, and did this every day, and she could look out the windows. And the way the table was and where she was sitting would be like, here's the windows, and here's the kitchen door here, and where she sat, it just happened to be that she could look out the window or look into the kitchen. And because she had this kind of two-way, and she was writing, she thought something passed her. She lived alone, and she was confused, and she got up from the table. She walked into the kitchen. Everything looked normal. She couldn't see anything, but she was just convinced that like a person had crossed this hallway, that she could look down into her kitchen. But she went back to the table. She said, I continued to write, and she said, I always have had a habit where I would put my left hand out like this, and I'm writing. And she said, it was only about 3 minutes or 4 minutes after I had checked the kitchen, and I'm writing, and Linda, it felt like somebody stuck a hypodermic needle right into my hand. And she said, I remember I yelled and I jumped back. And Linda, I really saw a being. It was a being. It was about 5 feet tall. It was sort of greenish gray. It didn't look exactly human, but it had a head, and it had a torso, and it had arms, and it had legs. It was there. But as soon as I jumped and screamed at the pain, it popped out. She said, I don't understand it, but I had to have seen it in the kitchen for real, my peripheral vision. And then, when whatever it did to my hand, and she did have a little hole in her hand, and it did start to bleed, and she said, how in the world would I ever even call a doctor or go to a doctor and say, I was writing at the table in my house, and I thought I saw somebody in the kitchen, and then they came in some form that was invisible and did a needle punch in my hand, and I just saw it for a fraction of a second, but it was gone after that. Well, I've always thought of that case as sort of reinforcing what some military people have said, that in Vietnam there was shape-shifting, invisibility, things would pop into visibility. And that what Lynn Monet experienced in that room with that woman in that hospital, that Lynn was able to see in a frequency or frequencies of what was happening that nobody else could. But when you start accumulating all of these cases from so many people and places around the world, you have to start, I think, giving sort of a bigger open space to the fact that our eyes are made to see in certain frequencies of humans. Our ears hear certain frequencies. But a dog hears a huge, huge range beyond what we can hear. And dogs and other animals see far frequencies beyond our eyes. So why is it not medically and physically possible that some humans see a wider range of frequencies, and that part of the key to the whole history of planet Earth, since primates were manipulated and into standing up humans, that the experimenters have always been able, if they wanted to hide from the primate Homo sapien experiment just by frequency vibrations. Except now, Lynn Monet is an example of other people, like the woman in Portland and the men fighting in Vietnam, where they have seen things flip in and out of visibility. And Lynn and I talked about that house that she and her children had lived in 2007. And it's really a roller coaster ride. And it was so intense, and so many amazing things happened that she wrote her experience into a digital book that came out on Amazon's Kindle in 2017. And I told her that I would let all of you know that if you would like to read more about Lynn Monet's experiences with translucent and appearing and disappearing entities in that 2007 house, that you can purchase this digital book called Omnipresent, meaning they're every present, they're always there, even if you can't see them. And you can order directly from Lynn Monet for $9.99 by sending her an email to omnipresent.the.book@gmail.com. I can just tell you that, having talked with her about what happened in that house, that this would be a very interesting book to read. And she needs the help. She's a nurse with her 3 children in a very difficult time. And the book was, in a way, when you express yourself, when you can't go to sleep at night without having a light on, because you've had all kinds of experiences, whether it was in the abduction experience or other, when there's a kind of a trauma, a psychological trauma that is always underneath your surface mind, being able to write it all out, being able to talk to somebody like me, it becomes therapeutic, it helps release, and in the process of reading her exploration through what she began to understand that she must be seeing in other frequencies, then she gets better and we get better by learning more and understanding that the universe that we're in, the planet that we live on, the scales that go on infinitely, the frequencies of perhaps infinite dimensions. This is what we are beginning to understand. And if you said, where is the future of human learning going? It's going to be beginning to understand that this matter world is just one shade of one frequency of an infinite number, which then makes the soul that can move in and out of other dimensions. That is what we should learn more about. That is what we should protect. That is what we should treasure and know, as Lynn said, there is the recycling in and out of a place that only human souls can enter. and that all of the other frequencies that would like our soul cannot. We need to know all of this not as mythology, not as fantasy, not as fiction, but as what is the true physics of our universe, the relationship of matter to this universe, and all of the other universes. I find it so exciting, and that if there are entities out there that want our souls, learning, the more we can learn, the stronger we become, the more resistant we would be. And that's part of my goal in meeting with you guys on Wednesday nights. So, Lynn Monet, I hope you will keep writing about your extraordinary gift of frequency. She said she would watch tonight, and keep giving us your education from seeing in those frequencies. And that I hope you in the audience will help her and learn by getting her book. And we will, Peggy, I will give you the email and the address and all of that for her book, and I'm going to say it one more time. Brad, maybe you can put it back up on the screen. That to purchase Lynn Monet's digital book about all of her experiences, being able to see the strange other frequencies in that house that she calls omnipresent, that you email the title of her book, omnipresent.the.book@gmail.com. And if there are others of you who have had the same kind of life experiences where you know that you are seeing in frequencies that are outside of the normal band of human perception, let me know. Because the only way that we are really beginning to see that phenomena is not something that can be dismissed as a myth, that it can't be dismissed as misunderstanding, is when more and more humans have the courage, like Lynn Monet, to say, this is what I have seen, and I'm not going to hide it. I am not going to apologize. These are real events. And to remember that Lynn Monet even said, excuse me, to an entity in a frequency that was coming through her body space to get to her patient. And that Lynn saw it so clearly that she said, excuse me, because her body was standing where what she could see was coming around the bed to do something else with that woman. It is sort of startling at one level, and yet it makes me curious at another. So with that, Peggy, I'd love to know what comments and questions we have tonight.
Hi, Linda. First, I'd like to say thank you to everybody for their super chats tonight. So thank you, Richard Gmail, Susan McClung, Carol Sivia, Mike Martin, Sergio Reyes, Doreen Garvey, Dolores Graff, Philip Gooden, Len Beeler, Mylene 69 2010, Victor Arias, Carolyn Hatchett, Priscilla Munson, Even Stephen, Happy Life, Dale Lawrence, and Britannia Young. Thank you, everyone.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will take that as enthusiasm for what we are doing, and that I am so enthusiastic back to you, wonderful audience of Earthfiles. I just love you. Thank you so much, and thank you, Peggy.
I think we have a great question just to go from what you were talking about earlier. And one of our viewers wants to know, how does the aura relate to the soul, and what does it mean if a person is missing an aura?
Wow, that is a fantastic question. I went to the laboratory of Thelma Moss, who was studying Kirlian photography, where she would have people put their hands on film. And then she would report that there would be different colors, and like it may be the hand, but you would see the colors coming around the fingers or coming off the head or whole bodies. And probably a lot of you in this particular audience, I would imagine that a lot of you would be interested or know about Kirlian photography. I know some people don't. But Thelma Moss was the leader at UCLA, and I lived and worked in Los Angeles. I was a reporter at KNBC and went to do an investigation of work that Thelma Moss was doing. And she told me that when there was not a corona, I think that was the word she used, these colors that come around the fingers that can change with all sorts of things having to do with, she thought, the soul and the chakras. If there were none, and we're going all the way back to 1969, 70, somewhere right in there, that she was shocked and stunned when a few cases there was no aurora or corona when she was doing the hands and the bodies on the photographic film. So that means that she was aware of it, but she didn't know what it means. I didn't know then that by 1979, in September, that I would be starting an investigation as head of the CBS station in Denver, being director of special projects. I wanted to find out what was happening with animal mutilations. And it was during that investigation that the question came up again about whether or not the entities that were doing the animal mutilations, why weren't more people seeing entities? They would see beams of light, they would see round discs in the sky, but there are no floods of reports of people seeing entities of any kind in the pastures, and yet the animal mutilations were ongoing. And now today, looking back, it may be that if there is no corona aurora as we understand it in studying the human body, it might be a signal that that is a body that has no soul. I would like to ask a couple of colleagues that I know and report back in an upcoming show about that. It is an interesting question. And would the lack of certain frequencies coming out of what looked like a normal human body be the key to what that MI6 man said to a friend of mine in England who had taken startling video of lights moving in a wheat field where there was a crop formation and a huge helicopter came, and it was all captured on his video. And this big helicopter comes over the hill here. The 6 lights are down here. The crop formation is here. My friend got this, was just lucky that he was there with a video camera, and this goes back into the 90s. And this MI6 guy, that's the equivalent of like the CIA in England. No call, just showed up at his front door. And when he answered his front door, the man introduced himself and said that he knew that he, my friend, had been talking with Moulton Howe a reporter in the United States, about getting onto HBO, which I was, some of the best video in England that was showing the lights and the helicopters. And this MI6 guy who showed his ID to my friend said, "I'm here to tell you, you are not to talk about this any further with Linda Moulton, Howe, and you are not going to use this video." And then my friend got very afraid. But he asked the MI6 guy, I was able to videotape those lights. And in the fields, you come down, you all, meaning the government, you come down in your helicopter and you come down low over everybody. Why are you doing that? And the MI6 guy, I've never forgotten this, was the quote, the answer. The United States and England and others, we have frequencies that we are looking for in crowds of people, because we have learned that certain frequencies are not Homo sapiens sapien. And that's how we separate out who is camouflaged on Earth as humans. Camouflaged. And in those summers, when I was going over to England in 92, 93, 94, 95, almost every year for about 12 years, you could be out in a field, no problem, and helicopter would come and come down 100 feet, 200 feet right above you. It happened to me when I went into a church. I went into a church just to see the insides of the church. And when I came out of a church, which was right at the edge of an area there where there was the Woodborough Hill, a helicopter, it was like it exploded over my head. I hadn't heard any helicopter in the church. You would think I would have heard a helicopter coming. I just was enjoying the beauty of it, and I said some prayers, and then I walked out of the church. I was headed toward my car about 100 feet away, and this huge helicopter was like 150 feet above my head. And my friend, the one who had that discussion with MI6, later on when I talked to him about what happened at the church, he said, they get frequencies. He said they're looking for frequencies. He said it may have been that you going into the church, that it set off certain frequencies. He says, I don't know. But he said they have housings on the bottoms of some helicopters that are scanning human populations, looking for specific frequencies. And in some cases, like the question, maybe it's lack of frequencies, just like the lack of an aura, that might be something that the government is analyzing, recording, accumulating data, and then when they get these frequencies, it's one thing, and if they don't get frequencies, it is another. All of this is that there are investigations going on by different governments and different units that are investigating frequencies and are associating certain frequencies with the presence or absence of humans and or another intelligence, another life form. I find this exciting. I find nothing about it that is scary. I want to know more and more and more. So if anybody listening has worked in military, intel, medical, experimentation, trying to separate who is in which category and what frequencies mean this, I would love to know more. Peggy, what about one more question?
A viewer would like to know, out of all the different blood types, is there one type that is more prone to alien contact?
The rarest blood The one most associated with the abduction syndrome is negative. And if you have if you are AB negative, that's probably at the top of the list, or A negative or B negative. Those would be the three categories that I understand, where the positives, whether it's O, A, B, AB, and there really are a lot of blood types. I believe in like if you go to a medical doctor, a hematologist, and they have these books on blood, I think there's something like 37 different recorded blood types on planet Earth. And some of them are only a few people. And it kind of flops over into this issue of, if it is true that there are other intelligences from other parts of the universe that have been using Earth as a laboratory and have been doing that for millions of years, and they have very specific things that they are producing for reasons we don't understand, but that certain blood types in certain geological areas of the Earth might be a purer strain of the intelligence's work. And so it might be that the Basques on the Pyrenees between France and Spain that have they have a negative, that they might be in the category of hybrids. So if you look at the whole huge geophysical surface of the Earth, and you think of all of the different types of humans that now exist, it may be that the non-humans starting work 270 million years ago, and then up through 2 million years ago, and 1 million years ago, and all of the phases that they have gone through, that the world might be more divided by different hybrid experiments than we would be aware, because it has been said by people in government talking to me that they knew that the Gray Ebens did experiments by putting certain genetic manipulations. Some would go on an island, some on a peninsula, some at a high altitude, as if they were experimenting by keeping certain genetic experiments isolated. They would still be human, but they would be human with perhaps a very specific blood type. And then if you look around the world, that the blood types, which now have gotten much more woven as populations have moved and airplanes in the 20th through the 21st century, it still may be that the UK government, the United States government, studying what they know about various types of blood, types of nationality associated perhaps with a higher percentage of UFO ET hybridization, that may be what's underneath all of this. And one of the subjects that I would love to know a lot more about and do more reporting. And in the end, this is part of what we need in confirmation from our government. We need it all explained to us. Lacking that, coming together on Wednesday nights, being able to share with you, get your questions, and make me do more research and bring back to you. I think this is the kind of dialogue that I wish we could be doing on a whole global basis. And maybe someday it will happen. But in the meantime, help me break through 150,000 subscribers, maybe by August 5th. And that next week, I can guarantee you, I'll bring you another facet that is coming to me from all of the incredible communications from you, and we will keep this dialogue of humans trying to figure out who we are, what kind of planet we're on, who else is here with us, whether they can't be seen with the retina, but they can be seen with instrumentations, and we're not alone in this universe. I love you.